Hello and welcome back to the Basic Bible Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Thompson. It's good to be back. We're finally back in the studio after a long hiatus. But joining us today, joining us back on the podcast is Pastor Zach Bartels. Zach, welcome back.
Hello, sir.
All right, now Zach, last week you alerted me to a serious problem that we have yet to address here on the podcast.
Monkeypox, yes.
Yeah, and so we're looking for your health expertise in this matter. When do we start the apocalypse, and when do we start masks?
If you haven't already masked up and gotten some of those apocalypse gloves that don't have fingers, you are way behind, all right? You need to get on that right now.
All right, so your assignment today, you need to go to the store now, buy as much toilet paper and baby formula as humanly possible, and stockpile that for the coming apocalypse.
Yeah, I want to see a big mountain of bullets in your basement and a big mountain of toilet paper rolls.
Yes, the essentials of life.
Yeah, that'll get you to the celestial city. Look, I dropped in a little segue.
Ooh, nice little segue. Okay, so the problem we have yet to address, we haven't talked about your latest podcast on the Pilgrim's Progress, so you're here to help rectify that issue.
Let's do this. Let's rectify it.
All right. So let's talk about the Pilgrim's Progress. Now, so you started this podcast a couple of months ago, and
January, very, very beginning of the year. So it's half a year ago now.
Wow, has it been that long?
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
See, my excuse was I was in the hospital at that point. So now I want to milk that for all it's worth. I was suffering away, having surgery at that point. So
monkeypox surgery?
I dropped the ball. No, that's coming up next month.
Oh, okay. Are you all well and good now, man?
I am well and good. Well, as well as I was before. So I don't know where that baseline is, but I'm back to myself.
That's what we want, buddy.
Yes.
I think the last time you and I got on, by the way, a virtual connection was the virtual smoke we did.
Yes.
The gut check smoke, which was probably simultaneously the most fun I had during all of the lockdown and what kind of killed that whole podcast. So, cheers.
Yeah. So, let's talk about that for a second, because I'm a little upset about that.
Oh, me too.
Because I was hoping to have more, because now, I am not a smoker. I don't do cigars, but one of my students who just graduated, so I won't mention his name in case they decide to take away his diploma for this, broke all protocol, broke all school rules, and he's actually from Cuba. He was stuck there for a little while, but when he came back, he had a nice cigar for me, a nice Cuban for me, and I was waiting for the next smoking lounge here at Gut Check. That never came.
Now, I don't want to promote my own other stuff by pointing out that there's a Gut Check book I co-authored with Ted Kluck called The Christian Gentleman Smoking Companion, but I wouldn't hold real high hopes for that Cuban cigar. It's probably not Cuban, even though, especially if you got it like there, especially if you got it in the airport, and B, Cubans just aren't the holy grail that they once were. That Castro doesn't let them rest the soil. Now you want, the Dominican stuff that we can readily get. But I think someday we're gonna. Here's the thing, man. Were you at? I tried to find you at T4G, and I don't think you were there. Were you?
No, I was not there this time.
See, we went and had a few of us, wonderful smoke there in Louisville, and there was a place that was a bar/cigar club. I don't drink, but I know a lot of people love to have a beer or some scotch or something with their cigar. So I don't know. Next time I am in the same vicinity as you have that with you, and let's just get together and do it live. There's something sad about a virtual gathering when you don't need to virtually gather. Although we're doing one right now out of necessity, right? I mean,
yes.
Where are you located?
I'm in Beloit. I'm in Beloit, Wisconsin, but I'm not too far. I know you went to the last Doc and Devos conference.
Yeah, I went to the last couple of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't at that last one, although I was supposed to be, but my schedule changed thanks to a kid and I think a broken arm at that point. But kids.
When you
But
broke a kid's arm?
well, I didn't personally break it.
Oh,
No.
good to hear.
No. Yeah, that was anyway. Our family is full of broken bones right now. We are running a clinic at some point.
Nothing suspicious. Very unsuspicious.
Yeah, but that freaks me out because every time I bring them into the ER, I think, is this the one where they're going to like be calling the police?
They're like, you hit your quota before you're suspect or something. You either have really daring kids or a little bit gawky kids at like kind of that age that are growing too fast, or a combination of them, and you're going to have some of that, right?
Oh yeah, I've got a combination. I've got kids who have no idea what it means to dial it back.
Nice.
They go
what?
full speed.
Those are people who make history, buddy.
Yeah. Well, when I got the 14-year-old playing soccer with the 5-year-old, and then the 5-year-old winds up in the ER because, the 14-year-old doesn't know, again, to dial it back. But I'm convinced at some point, it's sad when you bring them into the hospital and the staff already knows them. And they're like, oh, hey, we're here for this again. Great. So
we've been stocking your favorite kind of Gatorade.
Yeah.
We knew you'd be back.
We got your room all set, just the way you like it. We'll set the normal. All right, let's get back to the Pilgrim's Progress. Okay, so back in January,
buddy. We're starting.
All right, so you're launching this, and this is I've been binge listening here for the past couple of days, because unfortunately, I didn't get on at the beginning, but and I'm going to be honest, be blunt here. I hear Pilgrim's Progress. I think, okay. Been there, done that. I've read the book through several times. I mean, I've taught on the book. But then I listen in and I'm like, wow, okay. The very first episode, the very first scene with Apollyon just drew me right in. So let's talk about this. Let's get everyone on board and get you a few more listeners here. So tell us about the podcast, because it's unlike anything I've heard Pilgrim's Progress before.
Well, I was teaching a class myself, right? Leading a study with some of the men in my church, and I was listening to the book on tape. The book on tape. God, I'm so old, buddy.
There's tape. Okay, like literal tape.
No, it was on audible.com through an Android phone. But it felt like a book on tape. I don't know. And I was listening to it again and again. And here's the genesis of it, man. I just started finding myself. For your listeners who don't know me, I've been on your program before, but if they forgot, I'm an author and a pastor. So I've put out a good number of books, novels, some of them with a major publisher, one of the big four, and some of them independently with my buddy Ted Cluck and this thing we call Gut Check Press. And so, I've written probably a half dozen novels that I would put my name on and not be embarrassed about, and some of them that I was happy to get out there. So as I'm listening to this, I start having this impulse that I get kind of when I go over my own writing to like punch it up. Like, here's the thing about Bunyan. He's writing at a time where he's, to some degree, kind of a pioneer in the field of the sort of exciting narrative, almost novel that he's writing.
Yeah.
He's not the first guy to do it. Certainly, he's not the first one to do spiritual allegory. He's not the first to do any of this stuff. But he moved the ball forward so much in so many of these areas so early on that we stand back in awe. But at the same time, it's like, buddy, this isn't great by modern standards. Right. And then, of course, littered throughout, you have just dreadful poetry. In fact, I think the whole intro, which I skipped, the kind of apology for the work, which is in rhyme couplets, it's just so cringy. So my thought was,
thank you for saying that, because I felt that for a long time. But you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to criticize Bunyan, especially not this work. But thank you for clearing that up.
I mean, C.S. Lewis criticized him pretty roundly that he was just boring. But I think that's not true. I think that the work, I mean, despite what I just said, is so insanely such a masterpiece.
Yeah.
And I think I keep saying, so in between the chapters of it, my buddy and I get on and discuss it kind of. And I've a couple times said, I'm willing to say this is inspired, just with a lowercase I. Like, I mean,
Okay.
God seems to be speaking in this thing and imbuing it with levels of um, complexity that I doubt he even was aware of. Like, I mean, he was really in the zone on this
Yeah.
thing. Obviously, it's not scripture, it's not without error, but it is amazing. And so my thought was, and about the same time, I'm trying not to say something critical about something a great effort someone made that was laudable. About the same time we're doing this CGI movie comes out
Yep.
where Kristen Getty was involved, who I love. I love the Gettys.
Right.
She promotes it. It was for kids, and I was really, really, really excited about it. When it came out, I watched it the first day it was available. I bought it, digitally, and then I was kind of bummed by what they did with it. I thought that the animation left a lot to be desired
Yep.
after some of the stuff they had teased. And I thought they watered down parts of it that just,
Yeah.
I don't know, the whole thing. Again, I don't want to be critical of it. I hate people could do the same thing with what I'm doing right now, and it's not fair to analyze something someone did by saying you should have made the movie you didn't make. No, they should have made the movie they did make, and they did a good job at it. But like when I say let's make this dusty old half forgotten tome that used to be omnipresent in every Christian's household,
Yep.
let's take it and kind of represent it anew to a new generation. I don't know. I had higher hopes that they would kind of not grind down the sharp edges.
Right.
For example, I think of the Man in the Iron Cage, which is one of the more chilling and memorable images
Yeah.
in the Pilgrim's Progress. A guy who has quite literally sinned himself out of hope of mercy. This is the guy from Hebrews 6 who, he can't. He's crucified Christ anew. There's nothing left for him. He's tasted of the spiritual things, and it's a warning to Christian. Like, don't think of this. You can become inoculated to this stuff if you dabble in it and get kind of into it, and then fall away from it. And it's scary. Well, in the movie that I was watching, he sees in the interpreter's house the man in the iron cage screaming or sobbing, I'm hopeless, I'm hopeless. And then later on, when he's in the castle of the giant despair, Doubting Castle, and of course, he actually did acknowledge that he was tempted to off himself, which I thought they'd probably leave out. He thinks back to that and he's like, wait a minute, that guy was me. And so he then like thinks to pull promise out of his breast and let himself out. And I thought, well, why are you changing? And of course, any movie, whether it's the Liam Neeson one or this one, is going to have to leave out a ton, because it's if you read this whole book out loud, it's 12 hours long, and you have a 2-hour movie. And also, some of these dramatized readings that have come out before are a little too melodramatic for my taste. And I felt like there was as they say, a gap where someone could come in and take advantage of the suddenly re-lengthening attention span of Americans and Westerners in general. Like, our attention span was shrinking to the point where like Cuba, what was it called? That little like 5-minute
Oh yeah,
TV
the little
show thing?
app. Yeah, Cubies, I think, or
They
something like
thought
that.
that
Yeah.
was a good idea because people can only pay attention for 5 minutes. The thing failed, and at the same time, you've got people putting their headphones in and binging, 20 hours of serial or these podcasts, these
Right.
long form podcasts, or sitting down and binging through entire 4 or 5 seasons of a long form television show that's smartly written and is essentially a 10-hour movie or something.
Right.
And I thought, why not kind of punch it up, make it more relatable, make it a little bit more understandable, the language, punch up some of the writing issues, like withholding a little information and therefore having a bit of a reveal, and take advantage of this resurgence in long
Yeah.
form listening. And turned it into something that could be eventually binged. And in the moment now, hopefully people are, in fact, I know some people are greatly anticipating each episode. I know because if I miss a week, because I'm, again, I'm a pastor and this takes a ton of time, when you're doing these things on the side with a full-time occupation, I get a lot of messages going, hey, where's my episode? So hopefully this is going to be something that opens, if honestly, this sounds corny, but even if like one person really gets drawn to the gospel for the first time, or understands the beauty of the gospel, or the nature of the Christian life more because of this, all the effort will have been worth it. But I would also like to see, a lot of people who maybe had a kid's adaptation as a kid, or remember reading it or seeing a special about it or something, or people who just have been reading Spurgeon and he always references it and they've never taken the time to get into it, get introduced to it and go, oh, this is actually pretty fun and pretty exciting. And it's not inaccessible to a 21st century Christian. It doesn't feel like you're trying to care about something that we don't care about. All of these struggles and everything are universal. And what's been so crazy to me, I just got done with a chapter that was like vignettes. So I took a lot of the second tier characters that just get talked about and kind of told their story. And I was like, good grief, these could all be written right now, specifically about our age, especially like Little Faith and Linger After Lust. I mean, like all these characters they're so archetypical that there's no need to kind of recreate them. I just am trying to kind of represent them.
Yeah. It's been really cool because already I can tell you more than just one person has had that experience. Like my kids, just the other day, my older son, Tony, again, we were talking a little bit before the podcast. We're running like a little clinic now, or a hospice or something. I don't know. We've got one kid with a broken hand, another kid with a broken leg. And so they're with me a lot of times. And I said, hey, we're going to listen to this podcast. They find my podcast boring. I don't know why. I will chastise them for that later. But I said, hey, we're going to listen to the Pilgrim's Progress. And my oldest son like, oh, really? But now we're in the car together, and he's looking forward to it. In fact, he and the 10-year-old as well have really gotten into this. And they've only seen like children's version. We watched the Getty version you talked about earlier, because that was supposed to be like the save us from the pandemic type thing. They were showing it free for a while.
Too. Don't get me wrong. It was good.
Yeah. But that was their only experience, their only exposure to Pilgrim's Progress. But they're loving this series. And
nice.
now they're at. What's that?
I love that. I said that's good to hear. I love hearing that, especially young people. I sort of dangled it out there for my son who's 14, and he listened to a couple of them, and I think, I don't know, too much talking or something. I've been trying to. The beauty of this is I can take the boring parts, and there are a few.
Yeah.
There are times when he's like, he had information he wanted to get across, and he was like, I'm going to have these two characters talk until all that information, all that exposition is done. And you can just, because there's multiple things going on at once, even though Bunyan doesn't tell it that way, he gives you all of Christian's story until he meets up with Faithful. Then he has them walk down the road, and Faithful's like, well, let me tell you my whole story. And he just rattles through it.
Right.
I've made it kind of concurrent. So we're popping back and forth between Christian and Faithful. And when one of the stories is a little dry, and it might be the spot in the book where you might just give up and not go back to it, the other story we can make up for by drawing you in, and there are people coming in trying to kill him or seduce him, or whatever the case. He's being beaten half to death by Moses. I even have him pull a gun on Moses, which spoiler alert is not in the original text.
Right.
And I think maybe the first time ever in Christian fiction that anyone pulls a gun on Moses. Doesn't go well for him. And I have been, by the way, trying to be within reason accurate to the 17th century. For example, the episode that's going to go up this week, Christian gets some coffee. And I had to do some research and make sure it was available in England and that Puritans were okay with it. And Puritans loved it, by the way. It might
not have been McQuantico coffee, but I'm sure it was good.
Right now, I'm drinking that Mequano coffee. Well, it's almost gone. But I didn't sleep much last night, but I'm still extra amped because I got my Mukwano coffee. But yeah, the idea that it's this dry kind of dreadful thing, I think it's just sort of the limitations of 17th century prose and
Right.
a podcast. So I mean, I'm trying to do what I did with my audiobooks, which I've gotten a ton of really, really good feedback on that. I was able to get my audio rights back from HarperCollins
Hmm.
publishers and make them myself because obviously they were not going to make audiobooks of out of print books that they own. And I've been into audio for a long time, mixing audio. I've been into Foley recording stuff. I've been doing, dabbling in this stuff for just ages.
Yeah.
I did a whole podcast called Clinch where I was
Right.
telling a novel I wrote and kind of pepper in that stuff. But I tried to go to the next level with this, which is not distracting, but just shy of that. You're hearing what's happening. It's almost like the audio movie type thing that's
Right.
becoming kind of popular with who's putting those out? One of these big podcast networks is putting these out. And it's not exactly that because it's narrated. I'm telling the
Yeah.
story. It's not just, and it's one individual, and I'm not trying to do a bunch of voices all the time. But
Right. Which
the
would be
idea of it immersing you.
So you've got the audio, the dramatic audio, but then you've also got the digress episodes. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah. So my buddy, Mr. Sagacity, who he he's averse to being anyone knowing anything about him. So his name is, I guess, a secret, even though I do think I said it at one point in one of the
You
episodes.
did at the very first episode. You did kind of mention it.
Yeah, like I think I named him and said his address and like the names of his kids, but no, he and I have done. I used to co-host a podcast called These Go to 11 with Nathan Bell,
Yep.
Greg Dutcher. I don't know if you ever listened to that one. That was
Oh yeah.
I actually missed that quite a bit. That was a lot of fun.
Reverend James King, my favorite character.
Yes, James, King James, teaching, preaching. Yeah. Oh, Greg Dutcher is a treasure. Oh my gosh, I love that guy. But by the way, I'm the one who suggested the setup they have now, where it's Nathan and Nathan again, and they do a great job.
Yeah.
But at one point, I had Alex on, and he just gave his testimony, which is insane. It's not like he was, a serial killer or a heroin addict or something, and one day all of a sudden Jesus turned his life around. But it's instead a more young millennial kind of thing where it's life was less and less meaningful. Everything was more and more meaningless.
Yeah.
Everything felt like a chase after the wind until he didn't want to live anymore. And he picked up the phone in kind of that headspace and called a friend who was a believer who'd been trying to proclaim the gospel to him for a long time and got saved. And so, and after that, all of a sudden, his now wife, he leads to the Lord, and their whole friend group kind of becomes this group of formerly nihilist, gothy kind of worldview people to now young believers. And it's really cool to think about how closely this story follows the Pilgrim's Progress. So
Wow.
I was saved as a very young kid in a Christian household. For me, even though a lot of this rings very true, for me, a lot of it is a little bit remote from my experience because I don't have like all the friends who suddenly turned away. I don't
Right.
have some of the same struggles that someone coming to faith as a mature adult individual will have, with all the baggage and all the experience in life. And so bringing my buddy Alex in was the way to, and not only that, not only his life experience, just he's incredibly insightful and he knows the
Right.
scriptures like nobody's business. So like, and he knows the Pilgrim's Progress better than probably, I mean, not as well as Derek Thomas or some scholar on Bunyan, but he knows the
Yeah.
Pilgrim's Progress really well, and we relate a lot of our lives to it, and have even before we were doing this. We talk about this seems like the Slough of Despond,
Mm.
and so just to kind of talk it through. The original idea was just to give the texts. I didn't want anyone to be able to listen to this whole thing and go, oh, okay, I get that it's sort of religious and I get that it's trying to be exciting. I don't fully get what any of it means. I
Yeah.
just wanted to give the basics for someone who was completely new to it, but it immediately became clear that we were going to wind up delving deeper into some of these topics and
Right.
talking about some of the more nuanced stuff. just because it's fun. And so some of them are running an hour and a half on
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
discussion of a 40-minute episode.
But
I
those are
thought
pretty
people would.
cool. I mean, I enjoy them.
Well, see, I thought people would skip these and just listen to the, kind of spoon-fed stuff with all the fighting and escapes and everything. And a couple of the episodes, according to the stats that get emailed to me, more people have listened to our discussion of it than listened to the actual. And I'm going, what? Okay. But yeah, and you know what else has been tons of fun is the sound effects. I've got a Patreon, and I'm almost to the point where it's kind of self-sustaining, which is nice because for me, the labor of love is worthwhile. I'd love it if I didn't have to delve into my gut check and personal accounts to
Yeah.
keep on funding it, and I'm about at that point now. But even though I can afford to keep on licensing these things with some of the support we've gotten, I do enjoy trying to reverse engineer how to make a certain sound, and make it sound exactly like it does in my head. I've got a number of mics I've been using. I've actually been in a Facebook group with professional Foley artists, or the guys who
Oh,
record for
cool.
movies and TV and stuff, watching some of their tricks and how they make some of this stuff happen. It's funny to me, nature documentaries. Like, you watch nature documentaries where they've captured things from a mile away with a telephoto lens, and you don't even question the fact that they're getting this amazing sound. Even if it's slow motion, they're getting all this amazing. That's all Foley. That's all somebody going back over silent footage and putting in sound to fill it in. And I have been loving experimenting with this. I'm not amazing at it, but I think I'm getting better at it. And I was just spending a ton of time last night working on different. I mean, the big fight that we tease in the pilot is happening in episode 10, which is the next one that I'm going to record. And I'm working on different sounds of stabbing, and pulling the sword out of Apollyon, slowly pulling it out, and it's so fun. It was also fun how a noise that's one thing, when your brain is expecting it or picturing something else,
Yeah.
perfectly fits.
Huh. Yeah, that's got to be fascinating. How long does it take, for one episode, just updating the language, reading through, going through how long does that take? All the sound effects.
I mean, I'm writing them from scratch essentially, with just like the main one next to me. So writing each chapter probably has taken me 4 hours, and then editing it. My wife's a kind of famous novelist slash
Yeah.
also works in Christian publishing, so she's helping me sometimes with the editing and stuff. And then recording it probably a couple of hours, and then the Foley and everything. I'd say altogether it probably takes 15 plus hours on each ep.
Wow.
And some of them, if it's more dialogue, people sitting in different sized
Yeah.
rooms talking, that's fairly quick to do. But some of them, if they're more chocolate, the interpreter's house, where we're like, okay, now we're in this room, now we're over here where this guy's sweeping up ashes, now we're out here where this guy's fighting an army, now we're over in this cave where there's the dripping sound and everything echoes. It took a really long time.
Wow. All right. Well, speaking of a long time, we are out of time
Oh,
here at our podcast this week. But again, we want to recommend this podcast, The Pilgrim's Progress from High End Silver and Zach Bartels. I'll make sure to have the link on there on our show notes. We'll put it out on our social media as well. You need to listen to this. You're not going to regret it. It's nothing like you've heard before. I guarantee you're going to like it. If you've got teenagers like me, they're going to like it. And check it out. Zach, before we go, I got to ask you, as an official stockholder in the company now, what's going on down the pike for Gut Check?
Well, the big thing right now is that Ted Kluck's third book in his graphic novel series for kids, The Dog Lives, Flex #3, is in process. The amazing Megan Barada is doing not only the illustration, but she's actually going to be doing the book design. And I think it's going to be incredible. That got fully funded, and then a lot more on our Kickstarter. So that's kind of what Gut Check Press is working on. As far as the podcasts, sometime this summer, Ted and I plan to get together and do a crap ton of them in a row. and then I'll start releasing them again.
Yeah, we
Honestly,
haven't
it's
had a
been
summer of
hard to
gut
do.
check yet.
Pardon?
We haven't had a summer of gut check yet.
No, we teased it and said we were there, and then we just disappeared again. I don't know. I'm not in a full on like D-list reformed feud with Josh Loftus, but I am. In that he somehow Ted records an episode of Cluck, which I mean, how bootlicky away is that to get a guy to do a podcast with you? To say I'll name it
Right.
after you. I mean, he's a dear friend of mine, Josh Loftus, but I'd fight him right now, 100%. If he was here right now, we'd be fighting.
Okay, Josh has been on this podcast as well. I'd like to schedule a podcast where you guys fight on air.
You know what would happen, though? What always happens when I talk to Loftus, which usually is over Marco Polo, like two moms, is we just wind up talking about old Petra songs. That's
all right, Zach, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And again, we'll put on the link for Pilgrim's Progress, also Gut Check, and also your page where you can find more of your audiobooks, the Playing Saint series, The Last Con, and others. You reference Clinch as well. That's all there. And we'll make sure everyone's aware of that. So, Zach, thanks for taking the time and rectifying this problem that we haven't talked about yet.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
All right, so make sure you check out www.basicbiblepodcast.org. We can find all of that information. So join us back next week. Until then, have a good rest of your week.